Well, I'd like to read today from Luke's Gospel. And actually, I think this will kind of go right along with everything we've said already. And anyway, Luke's Gospel in chapter, 17. Luke chapter 17 and verse 20. Luke chapter 17, verse 20. And, right in the middle here of this chapter, there's already been some things said, and Jesus has already been talking. And, of course, the Pharisees, they were unhappy with him, and I think you can read between the lines, they're a little bit jealous, and all kinds of hostility from the Pharisees. Those were sort of his adversaries. And so they're always giving him trouble and raising questions. And in verse 20 here it says, when he was demanded of the Pharisees when the kingdom of God should come, he answered them and said, the kingdom of God cometh not with observation. Neither shall they say, lo here, or lo there. For behold, the kingdom of God is within you. Or an alternate translation would be among you. Either way, it's kind of saying the same thing. And he's not saying it's one or the other. He's just saying it's already operating. It's already begun to operate. It's already functioning. But it's interesting what he said. When he said it does not come with observation. The marginal reading says with outward show, and I think you can get that from the word observation. And he says, neither shall they say lo here, lo there. What he's getting at is you can't just, he's pointing out the problem with the Pharisees' perception of it. And what was it that they expected? Well, they expected a big, I suppose they expected a big military campaign. You get the impression that they thought that the Messiah would come in sort of like, one of the military, leaders you read about in the Old Testament, like David, for instance, with a sword in his hand, and then drive the Romans out, and it's something like that, I guess. Jesus was not doing that. He didn't operate that way. He didn't have a sword in his hand. And he didn't do things outwardly. He was working inwardly. And he even says this is really, he's pointing out that they misunderstood what the kingdom of God was. Not something out here, it's something in here. It's something to do with the heart, something to do with a change of heart. And something that, when we're talking about this, that I always like to point out every time we talk about this is, the way human beings make change in the world, it's all outward. It's all with guns and bombs and military force, and outwardly suppress or control people, then try to make them behave from the outside. But God doesn't work that way. Jesus is saying God works from the inside out. He changes hearts one at a time, as a matter of fact. And you might think on the surface that's an inefficient way of doing it, but it's actually the best way of doing it. Because if you come from the outside, you can force people to do a certain thing or to behave a certain way, but you can't change their heart. I think all the totalitarian governments that we've seen through the 20th century have proved that. You can't change their hearts. So God's all about changing hearts one at a time. There's another parable about the kingdom of God that is interesting, that bears on this. And it's in Matthew's gospel this time. Jesus had a lot of parables about the kingdom of God, trying to get across what it really is and what it's really like. And from that previous example, we saw that he said it's something that's inward, of the heart, changing hearts. Here in Matthew's Gospel in chapter 13, verse 33, this is an interesting parable. Another parable spake he unto them. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal till the whole was leavened. That's really an interesting conception, isn't it? If you've ever made bread. Now, we used to have a bread machine at one time. Remember that? And I remember the one time I put all the materials in there, and I forgot the little packet of of yeast. I forgot the leaven. And that wasn't very good bread. But the way it works is the leaven, in the old-fashioned way of doing it, you had to, knead it and, flip it over and push and, do all that sort of thing. And it's a way of working that leaven or that yeast into all the different parts of the bread so that it affects the whole. And that's what he's alluding to here. And he says that's what the kingdom of heaven is like. It's like leaven. It's like yeast or leaven that's at first hidden in the bread dough. And he says until. That's interesting. Till. That means there's a process of time. And the goal is that the whole is leavened. And what got me started thinking about this was all the talk about COVID, and the coronavirus and how contagious it is, and I don't doubt any of that, but it got me thinking about this verse here. The kingdom of God, I think Jesus is saying, if we could say it another way, it's contagious. It spreads. I think that's what he's getting at here. It doesn't just stay put. It works on the inside. See, both of these passages talk about something that's hidden, something that's not out here where you see it, but it's working inside. And I want to say it's highly contagious, and we're going to look at some examples here in a second. But I don't know if you ever heard about the principle of exponential growth. Now, I had to consult the math teacher back there and be sure to tell this right now, and I've had her tell it to me twice, so let me see if I can repeat it right. You want to just tell them? No. Okay, here's the illustration she gave me. I guess this is something that comes up in math and so forth. The idea is that if I came to you and made you an offer and said, I will give you $1 million. Now don't get excited, this is just this is just a preacher illustration. I'll give you $1 million today, or I'll give you a penny today. But if I give you a penny, I will double it every day for 30 days. Which would you rather have? Well, obviously, we would all just say, well, give me the $1 million right now. Keep your penny. But what's unclear about that and what you miss is that when I first give you the penny, that seems like the smallest thing possible. In fact, you know what? That reminds me, many of the parables of Jesus say the kingdom of God is like that. He said, in many of them, he said it's like a mustard seed, which is the smallest of all seeds. You remember those parables? You've heard them all. I don't need to turn and read those, do I? We know those. He said the same thing, but here's the way it works. If I give you the penny today, and tomorrow I give you 2 pennies, and the next day I give you 4 pennies, I've started a process, and it is called exponential growth. And in the first beginning of that, it doesn't seem like much. In fact, the first couple of weeks of that, it's not going to seem like much. It's going to be relatively small numbers. But when you get down to that last week, you're dealing with enormous numbers. In fact, you'll end up with, how much is it, 11? 11 million at the end of the month if I start off with a penny and double it. Now that's what's meant by exponential growth. And by the way, all these health experts that you see on television and Dr. Fauci and all of them, they're trying to get everybody to wear masks and wash their hands and social distancing. They're not really so concerned about you as an individual. They don't even know you. They're looking at the big picture. They're worried about this thing called exponential growth. Because if you have something that's contagious and it just affects one other person, that's not such a big deal. But if it's 2 or more, then you've started a process which is called exponential growth. Now that's a negative thing, but we've got a positive thing that works the same way. It's highly contagious. It's the kingdom of God. And Jesus said, it works on the inside, but it doesn't just stay there. It spreads. And he says here, let's read this again. Another parable spoke he unto them, the kingdom of heaven is like unto leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal, till the whole was leavened. Now what's he really talking about in that parable? Well, there's 2 ways to look at it, I think. You could interpret it that he's talking about you and your personal life, and that when you start out as a Christian, you don't understand everything, and maybe it doesn't seem like all that potent, but as you continue in the Word and continue walking with the Lord, it eventually affects your whole life. I think that's true. But I think Jesus is looking at the big picture, just like these doctors and all that you see on TV that are worried about exponential growth. I think Jesus is talking about the world here. I think what he's getting at is, I am introducing into the world, when he told the Pharisees, when they demanded of him when the kingdom of God should come, and he pretty much said, don't be looking out here for it, but when he said the kingdom of God is within you or among you, I think what he's hinting at is it's already at work. And we might, at that time, you might say he was within, to use the analogy about the penny, he's just in that first week where a penny turns into 2 and turns into 4. But how does this affect you and me? What's our part in this? Well, I'd like to look at a couple of possible illustrations of this. The first one's in John's Gospel, chapter 4. And I just want to make a few observations about this. John's Gospel, chapter 4. And I'm going to start with verse 4. Gospel of John, chapter 4. It said, he must needs go through Samaria. All right, that's Jesus, and he has to pass through Samaria. Then cometh he to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near to the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Joseph's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied on his journey, sat thus on the well. And it was about the 6th hour. Now, got the picture so far? Jesus is on his way through Samaria. He hasn't set up a tent. He's not having a revival. He's just tired and sat down on the well. Isn't that what we read? I mean, he's just going about his everyday. He's on the way somewhere, and this is just an incident. He just happened to sit down, and he's tired. Let's see, where did I leave off? Jacob's well was there. And it was about the 6th hour. Verse 7, there cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus saith unto her, give me to drink. For his disciples were gone away to the city to buy meat, or food. Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, how is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. And Jesus answered and said unto her, if thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith unto thee, give me to drink, thou wouldest have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. And the woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence hast thou this living water? By the way, that expression could be translated water of life, either way. The woman verse 12. Art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave us this well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle? And Jesus answered and saith unto her, whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again, but whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst, but the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water, springing up into everlasting life. The woman saith unto him, Sir, give me this water, that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. She's thinking, well, I don't know what you're talking about, but if I don't have to come here, drag this bucket here anymore. See, that's what she's saying. Jesus saith unto her, Go and call thy husband, and come hither. The woman answered and said, I have no husband. Jesus said unto her, Thou hast well said, I have no husband, for thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou now hast is not thy husband. In that thou saidst truly. The woman saith unto him, Sir, I perceive thou art a prophet. That's a pretty good answer after that, isn't it? I was just thinking, what would you say, in response to that? Our fathers worshipped in this mountain. Well, what you do is you try to change the subject. That's what she said. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and you say that in Jerusalem is the place where you ought to worship. Jesus saith unto her, Woman, believe me, that the hour cometh when you shall neither in this mountain nor at Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship you know not what. We worship, we know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. The woman saith unto him, I know that Messiah cometh, which is called Christ. When he is come, he will tell us all things. Jesus saith unto her, I that speak unto thee am he. And upon this came his disciples, and marveled that he talked with the woman. Yet no man said, What seekest thou, or why talkest thou to her? The woman then left her water pot, and went her way into the city, and saith unto the men, Come, see a man which told me all things that ever I did. Is not this the Christ? And then they went out of the city, came unto him. Now, what do we really see happening in this story? Well, some people would say, well, Jesus, knew all this was going to happen, and he planned it all out this way, and he said all those things to her in a crafty way to kind of manipulate her. He knew that she would react. And say, no, I don't think any of that's true. Here's what I think. I think Jesus was tired and sat down to rest, and this woman came along, and he just started showing compassion to her. He just started expressing interest in her. And, of course, he's Jesus, and he's got tools to work with that maybe you and I don't have. He's got insights. In other words, if I'm just going about my everyday life and I run into somebody, I don't necessarily know everything about their life. But I can do the same thing Jesus did. He just showed compassion to her. He just showed love to her. See, I think that's the key thing that's contagious about the kingdom of God. It's a kingdom that functions by love. It starts with God's love, for God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son. And then we, as recipients of the kingdom of God, are now filled with that same essence of God's nature and God's love. I think he just engaged this woman in a conversation because he cared about her, because he was interested in her. And as she began to reveal, some things about her, he was just interested in, as Charlie was saying a while ago, just making right what was wrong. I think this woman, if we read between the lines here, it gives you the impression that she's carrying this weight of guilt about her past and her past failures, perhaps. And we don't know we don't know the whole story about all these marriages and all these men, and we don't know what happened. But evidently, from what Jesus is saying here, she's carrying this weight of regret, perhaps, or guilt, or who knows what, sorrow, we don't know. But Jesus is all about being kind to her, and he knows that what he's got can make right whatever's wrong. Now, again, we're not Jesus, and we don't have all the spiritual tools perhaps that he has, but we can be kind to people just like he is. And you notice what the result of this is. After this little interaction with Jesus, when he had, really all he did was have a little conversation with her. Did you notice that? He just had a little talk with her. And based on what he didn't preach to her. He just had an interested conversation where he was interested in what her concerns were, and he shared his point of view with her. I'm saying it that way so that you identify with it and say, we could be the same way. And what the result was, she went away and it spread from her to everybody in the village. She said, come and see this Jesus who told me all about myself, She got infected with the water of life, or the kingdom of God, or I want to say the love of God. She got touched by it. And it spread not just to her, but to everybody within her circle. Did you see that? The example is, for us, I think, this all didn't happen in a church. This just happened out just in everyday life. you know. And it wasn't necessarily that Jesus was out to sell her or anything, or he just got into a conversation with her. He just said, give me something to drink. And they got in this talk about the water, and she got touched. I want to say she got infected with what was in Jesus, which was, as he said before, it's like leaven that a woman hid in 3 measures of meal. It spread to her, and then it spread from her to all the people in her circle. Here's another one. This is in Mark's Gospel, chapter 5. And verse 18 is where I want to start, Torrin. Mark's Gospel, chapter 5, verse 18. You know, most people in the world aren't going to come inside a church. We're in here, but most people, I don't have to give you statistics. You understand instinctively, you understand without me even saying so, that if you take the whole population of Alva, there's more people not in church than are in church. Isn't that right? We're not talking about something that has to take place inside a church. We're talking about something that just takes place in your everyday life as you interact with people, as you show kindness and compassion and love, and just be interested in people that you come in contact with. And you know what? Here's another thing Jesus says about the kingdom of God. I'm not going to we could turn and read all these, but I'm just going to quote it to you. Here's something he said. Well, it's right here in Mark's Gospel. You know what? Since we're here in Mark, let's just read it. I happen to know that it's here. This is in, I think it's in Mark. After I said that, now you don't see it. Well, I'm just going to quote it to you. Oh, yeah, it's here. I just turned too many pages. Turn back a chapter to chapter 4 and verse 26. Now this chapter 4 is all full of parables about the kingdom of God. I like this one. Verse 26. So is the kingdom of God. This is Mark 4:26. So is the kingdom of God as if a man should cast seed into the ground, and should sleep and rise night and day, and the seed should spring up and grow. He knoweth not how. You know what that parable is saying? That the seed, which is the kingdom of God, it grows, and you don't even have to know how. You don't really it's not you doing it. It's not you manipulating it. The seed's doing it. See, he even says the man put the seed in the ground, then he went to sleep. He just, that's how it is. Listen, as a farmer, if I had to go out there and make those seeds grow, how do you suppose I would do that? If I had to go out there every day and make it happen, how can I do that? I don't know anything about that, but here's what I do. And see, I'm not the greatest farmer in the world, but I know this, that once I plant the seeds in the ground, they start growing. And just like it says here, I know not how. And if you told me you need to go, and sometimes farmers are like that. They go out there every single day and drive up and down with their pickup truck and look at it. And I always think to myself, why? What are you going to do after you put the seed in the ground? Maybe it's just because I'm lazy. But to see what Jesus is saying here is the kingdom of God is something that it's got a life of its own. And you don't have to know how it works, and you don't work it. See, once you've got it, you're infected with it, let's say it that way. That sounds so bad, doesn't it? Once you are touched by the kingdom of God, it's at work within you, and as you come in contact with other people, listen, it's just like this virus that everybody's worried about, and I'm not trying to diminish that at all. You don't have to deliberately try to spread it. See, if a person's infected with it, all they've got to do is go about their business, and it spreads on its own. Is that right? Well, if a dangerous, deadly virus can do that, how much more do you think the kingdom of God is capable? Backed up by the wisdom and the Spirit of God. See, it's contagious, and you don't have to do it, and it's not a burden that's on you to do it. See, I think sometimes we misunderstand. We think we're kind of like the Pharisees. We're looking for an outward show. We think we've got to go out here and save everybody, you know. You know what most people's response is when you go and try to push on them and you know, and save them, so to speak. Most people, when you push on them, they push back. But I'll tell you something. The kingdom of God is subtle. And it works just like Jesus. You know, Jesus didn't say, let's make an altar here. I'm going to make an altar. You come down here to this altar and pray, and you need to get saved, woman. You know, you woman with 5 husbands. He just was kind to her. Did you notice that? He was just kind to her and talked about her concerns. And she got touched by the kingdom of God. And she went to her village and told everybody else about it. And they all got touched. If you go on reading, it says they all came to hear Jesus. They came to Jesus. She did. You think she was an evangelist and went to seminary? She didn't know anything except she knew she got touched with the kingdom of God. This is so anyway. The seed grows, and the farmer knew not how. He put the seed in the ground, and it said the seed's got a life of its own. Let's put it that way. Okay, now I was going to read Mark chapter 5, verse 18. Let's get back and let's get the beginning of the story. It's a good story here. Verse 1. And they came over unto the other side of the sea, into the country of the Gadarenes. And when he was come out of the ship, this is verse 2, immediately there met him a man out of the tombs, a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no man could bind him, no, not with chains, but because that he had been often bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters were broken in pieces. Neither could any man tame him, and always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs crying and cutting himself with stones. But when he saw Jesus afar off, he ran and worshipped him, and cried out with a loud voice, and said, What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of the Most High God? I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not. Now, you know what? This was a man's voice, but it wasn't the man initiating the conversation. This was the spirits within him. Because this man didn't know Jesus, but the spirits on the inside of him, these demons, did know him. And that's who's talking through this man's voice. They are like parasites inside of this man, using him. And so they're, saying to Jesus, don't torment me. Verse 8, For he said unto him, Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit. And he asked him, What is thy name? And he answered, My name is Legion, for we are many. Sometimes I've wondered about that. Why did he stop and say that? What is your name? And some people who, I don't want to get off on that. You don't have to do that, I mean, that's not necessary. You know why Jesus, never occurred to me until I was just reading it just now. You know why he stopped and said, What is your name? It's because the spirit within that man just got there saying, I know you, I know who you are. So Jesus said, well, who are you? You see? Just like you would do if somebody on the street said, I know you. Well, who are you? This demon said, I know you, who you are, Son of God. Oh, yeah? Do you? Well, who are you? He answered, My name is Legion, for we are many. And besought him that he would not send them away out of the country. It's very strange about this, about demons. It seems like they want to stay put. It's a very strange thing, but that's not of our concern. They don't need to be inside of people. That's the deal here. Now there was there nigh unto the mountains a great herd of swine feeding, and the devils besought him, saying, Send us into the swine, that we may enter into them. And forthwith Jesus gave them leave, and the unclean spirits went out and entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down a steep place into the sea. Well, that worked out well, didn't it? And they were choked in the sea. They probably should have said, Send us into a tree or something. Anyway, they that fed the swine fled and told it in the city and in the country, and they went out to see what it was that was done. And when they came to Jesus, see him that was possessed with the devil, and he had the legion sitting and clothed in his right mind, they were afraid. I've heard people comment on this before, that They didn't seem to be afraid when he was out there tormented with cutting himself with stones, but now that he's in his right minds, now they're afraid. That's kind of an ironic thing. And they saw, and they that saw it told them how it befell him that was possessed with the devil, and concerning the swine. And they began to pray him to depart out of their coast. And when he was come into the ship, he that had been possessed with the devil prayed him that he might be with him. Howbeit Jesus suffered him not, but saith unto him, Go home to thy friends, tell them how great things the Lord hath done for thee, and hath had compassion on thee. Verse 20 says, And he departed and began to publish it in Decapolis. Decapolis is a name, it means, it's got this prefix deca, it means the 10 cities. So it sounds like these little villages around there, 10 of them perhaps. He began to just go around there telling, it says, how great things Jesus had done for him, and all men did marvel. Now again, in this story, it's a very similar things happened. Jesus was just going about his business, and they sailed across to this place, and they came in contact with this guy. Now this was a little more difficult situation, a troubling situation. This man was tormented with devils and demons, but you know, that's not too big for Jesus. Jesus knows how to handle that sort of thing. But you notice what it says here. Look at verse 19. I'm going to read that again. Howbeit Jesus suffered him not, and saith unto him, Go home to thy friends, and tell them how great things the Lord hath done for thee. Look at this last part. And hath had compassion on thee. I think from Jesus' point of view, all he was doing is going around showing compassion to people. Compassion is like an empathy, where you're concerned about the needs of others, concerned about the things that are going on. It doesn't mean that you have to preach to everybody, or that you have to set up like I said before, a tent revival, and you just have to be interested in people. Just be concerned and show compassion. And here's what I draw from that. You notice that this man who was touched, he came into contact with Jesus, with the compassion of God that Jesus conveyed to him. You know, this took a different form than with that woman we read about at the well, but the same thing is underlying it all. It was just compassion, just the compassion of God, interested in the things that were wrong, or the things that were troubling, or the things that were burdens in these people's lives. And just his simple love and compassion for them touched them. And like the woman who went into the village and told everybody about, come see this Jesus who knew all about my life and knew how to fix everything. This man says he departed and began to publish in Decapolis all the great things that Jesus had done for him. He became a spreader, we might say, of the kingdom of God. And it really just boils down to compassion and care and love. You know, it's not about a sermon. It's not about manipulation. It's not about closing a sale. It's just about caring for people and showing compassion to them. And that's how the kingdom of God, as contagious as it is, you don't have to plan it. You don't have to. See, this is what's so interesting and kind of exciting about it. You don't have to make a plan, because the seed knows how to grow all on its own. It knows how to spread all on its own. All you got to do is come into contact with people in your everyday life and love them and show the kindness of God. Okay, that's all we got today. Let's all stand up. I'm glad we're involved with